Do you feel like your bones are silently betraying you, without pain, without warning, waiting for the most trivial moment to steal the independence you spent a lifetime building? This fear is real, and the statistics confirm it. But there is a simple, science-validated solution that most doctors haven't told you about yet. I'm Dr. Kevin Vries, and in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what to do to protect your bones before it's too late. The real fear behind falls. There is a fear that many people carry in silence, but rarely verbalize. The fear of falling and never being the same person again. It's not an exaggeration, it's a statistic. 1 in 3 people over 60 who fracture a hip never regain the independence they had before. Never again. This number has followed me for years in my practice, and I had to learn to talk about it honestly, without sugarcoating it too much. What worries me most is not the fall itself. It's what was happening inside the bone long before it. Mrs. Maria, a patient who came to me after slipping in the bathroom, told me she barely hit the floor hard. It was almost just a stumble, but her femur gave way, because that bone had already been deteriorating for years in absolute silence, without pain, without a sign, without any warning. That's what makes this situation so treacherous. The bone functions as a living structure in constant renewal. When this process becomes unbalanced with age, the structure loses density from the inside without you feeling a thing. It's like a wall that looks solid on the outside but is already hollow on the inside. Any impact, no matter how small, can make everything crumble. Stay with me on this line of reasoning, because here comes a detail that almost no one notices. Most serious fractures don't happen in serious accidents. They happen in trivial stumbles, on a step, on a rug, on a wet floor. The fall was small. The damage was enormous. And the difference between those who recover and those who lose their independence was often being written years before, inside a bone that no one was monitoring. When I get to this point with my patients, many are in shock, not because they were afraid of falling, but because they never imagined that the problem was already there, silent, waiting for any opportunity to reveal itself in the worst possible way. Osteoporosis. The silent thief bones don't hurt while they're weakening. This is perhaps the most treacherous part of osteoporosis. It acts without warning, without pain, without any alarm signal. And while you live your life normally, thinking you're fine, they are becoming more and more porous, more and more fragile on the inside. I usually explain it to my patients like this. Imagine a new sponge, dense and firm, capable of supporting weight. Now imagine that same sponge full of holes, too light, breaking with the slightest effort. That's exactly what happens to the bone when osteoporosis advances in silence. The structure empties from the inside, and you only realize it when the damage has gone too far. In Brazil, about 10 million people live with this condition. Over more than 15 years of clinical practice, I have seen patients come to the office only after a hip or spine fracture, without any serious impact, just a trivial stumble, a sudden movement, a scare, and right there, in that moment, life changed completely. 1 in 3 women over 50 will suffer a fracture due to bone fragility. It's a number that should make us stop and think. But what worries me most is not just the fracture itself. It's what it represents: loss of mobility, dependence, prolonged pain, and in many cases the beginning of a decline that could have been avoided. Most people only find out they have osteoporosis after the bone has already broken, not before, after. This is the real problem with silent thieves. They don't knock on the door, they don't ask for permission, they don't leave a visible trace until the damage is already done. And when the pain appears, when the doctor points to the scan and explains that the bone is compromised, the feeling of betrayal is enormous. Because the person did what they thought was right, they ate well, they moved, they lived their life. But there was a battle happening inside their bones that they simply didn't know existed. The mistake of isolated calcium. For years, a simple idea was repeated in doctors' offices, pharmacies, and on social media: take calcium for strong bones. And this idea, although well-intentioned, hides a mistake that I need to explain to you carefully, because it could be harming you without you realizing it. Calcium is essential, that's a fact. But what many people don't know is that supplemented calcium without the right partners in the body won't end up where you want it to go. Without the adequate presence of vitamin D, it simply cannot be efficiently absorbed by the intestine. And without vitamin K2, it doesn't receive the correct signal to direct itself to the bone. The result? This excess calcium can be deposited where it shouldn't be, on the walls of your arteries. Stay with me on this line of reasoning because here comes a detail that almost no one notices. Imagine calcium as a building material delivered to the wrong construction site. It arrives, but without the right engineer to direct where to install it, it accumulates in the wrong places and causes structural problems you didn't expect. This is exactly what happens in the body when calcium supplementation is done in isolation. I see this frequently in my clinical practice. People who have been taking calcium for years, thinking they are taking care of their bones, but who are actually increasing their cardiovascular risk without knowing it. A patient once brought me a scan that showed arterial calcification even without a family history of heart problems. When we analyzed her routine, the calcium without K2 and without D was there every day for more than 5 years. The bone is a living structure, not a static deposit. It renews itself, adapts, responds to physical stimuli, and depends on a network of nutrients working together. Vitamin D opens the door for calcium to enter. Vitamin K2 tells it where to go. Physical stimulus, even if light, signals to the bone that it needs to remain dense and functional. Without this combination, calcium alone is like a puzzle piece placed in the wrong spot. Over more than 15 years of following patients in this age group, I've learned that the problem is rarely a lack of intention to take care of one's health. The problem is the incomplete information that reaches people. And incomplete information, when it comes to supplementation, can have real consequences in the body. Weak muscle means weak bone. What many people don't know is that bone and muscle talk to each other. This is not a figure of speech, it's real physiology. Every time a muscle contracts, it pulls on the bone it's attached to. This pull, this constant mechanical stimulus, is a signal that the body interprets as, this bone is being used, it needs to be kept strong. When this signal stops, the body begins to disinvest. It's as simple as that. I see this frequently in my practice. Patients who arrive with a diagnosis of osteoporosis and, when we investigate closely, we realize that the bone loss has gone hand in hand with a silent loss of muscle mass. The two problems have names: sarcopenia, the loss of muscle, and osteoporosis, the loss of bone. And they feed off each other, like two floors of the same building that is giving way from the top down. Think about what happens to a person who becomes more sedentary over the years. The muscles lose volume, the stimuli on the bones decrease. The body, which is extremely efficient, interprets this as a waste to maintain a structure that is not being demanded. So it begins to reduce bone density to redistribute resources. It's like a company shutting down a department that has stopped producing. I treated a patient, Celia, 67 years old, who had never smoked, had been taking calcium for years, did everything right, as she herself said, but she had stopped walking 2 years earlier because of knee pain. When we did the densitometry scan, the decline was severe. The calcium was available. The problem was that no one was sending the signal to the bone that it needed to stay strong. Here comes a detail that almost no one notices. It's not enough to have the building material available. The body needs a reason to build, and that reason is called movement with muscle load. Without it, vitamins and supplements do little. The bone responds to use, and the muscle, when kept active, ensures that this use happens continuously throughout life. Creatine, the solution few associate with bones. There is a supplement that carries an unfair stigma. When someone mentions creatine, the image that comes to mind is usually of young people working out in a gym, focused on gaining muscle volume. This association is so strong that most people over 60 don't even consider asking about it, and that's exactly where the mistake lies. Science has gone beyond what common sense imagines. What the latest studies show about creatine goes far beyond athletic performance. It acts directly on the cells that build your bones. That's right. I'm not talking about an indirect effect, one of those that depends on a long chain of events to happen. I'm talking about a direct action on osteoblasts, which are the cells responsible for forming and repairing bone tissue. And here comes a detail that almost no one notices. These cells need energy to work. When they don't have enough energy, the process of bone renewal becomes slow, incomplete, fragile. I see this very frequently in my practice. Patients who come to the office with scans showing progressive bone loss, who are already taking calcium, already taking vitamin D, but the bone continues to deteriorate. And when we investigate deeply, one of the missing links was precisely the ability of the bone cells to function with sufficient energy. Creatine acts at this stage. It provides an energy substrate directly to the osteoblasts, allowing them to work more efficiently in building and repairing the bone. It's as if you had competent masons with all the materials available, but without the strength to build the walls. Creatine gives this strength back to the internal work of your skeleton, and it doesn't stop there. The muscle that creatine also strengthens acts as a direct partner to the bone, transmitting mechanical stimuli that signal to the skeleton that it needs to remain dense and resistant. The two systems benefit together from the inside out. How to use creatine in practice. Adding something new to your routine can seem complicated, especially when you already have a list of medications, schedules, and cares. So let me show you that in this case, it's simpler than you think. The dose I guide in my practice is 3 to 5 grams a day of creatine monohydrate. This is equivalent to a level teaspoon. No loading phase, no splitting doses throughout the day, no fixed time that will drive you crazy if you forget. Once a day, every day, and the effect comes with consistency, not with haste. A detail that my patients love when they find out. The powder has no taste at all. You can dissolve it in water, juice, milk, yogurt, coffee. You won't feel anything different in the drink. It has no bitter taste, no strange smell. It simply disappears in the liquid. This eliminates the barrier of, I won't be able to take it because I can't stand the taste. Now, here comes a detail that makes a real difference in absorption. When you take creatine with breakfast, especially accompanied by a fruit, a glass of juice, or any source of carbohydrate, your body releases insulin to process that natural sugar. And insulin is exactly what carries creatine into the muscle cell more efficiently. It's like using the elevator instead of taking the stairs. The destination is the same, but the arrival is faster and more complete. I see this frequently in the office. People who have tried supplements before and gave up because they found it too complicated or because they didn't feel any results. Most of the time, the problem wasn't the supplement, it was the way it was used. With creatine, daily consistency is worth more than any elaborate strategy. The muscle responds to accumulation, not to the effort of a single day. The trio that shields the bones. None of the three works at its full potential when it's alone. This is one of the most important lessons I've learned over the years caring for patients with fragile bones, and it's rarely explained with the clarity it deserves. Creatine, as I've already said, helps the muscle have strength. But the muscle needs a firm bone to support it, and the bone needs available calcium to rebuild itself. That's where vitamin D comes in, and its role goes far beyond what most people imagine. It's not enough to ingest calcium. The body needs vitamin D to open the door of the intestine and let that calcium truly enter the bloodstream and reach the bone. Without this vitamin, a good part of what you ingest simply passes through the system without being used. It's like watering a plant with a leaky bucket. I see this in my practice with a worrying frequency. The person has been taking calcium for years, does everything right, and yet the bone continues to lose density. When we investigate, we find vitamin D levels on the floor. The problem was never the lack of calcium, it was the lack of what allows calcium to work. But the cycle doesn't close with supplementation alone. Stay with me here because this detail changes everything. Impact exercise, even if light, sends a direct mechanical signal to the bone. A 30-minute walk, a squat with wall support, simple movements that most people underestimate. This signal tells the bone that it needs to be dense, that it is being used, that it is worth investing in its own reconstruction. Without this stimulus, the bone has no reason to renew itself. The three elements form a cycle. Creatine supports the muscle performs the movement stimulates the bone. Vitamin D ensures that the calcium reaches the right destination. And the bone, with all this working together, has a real chance to stay firm. Removing any of these elements is like trying to light a fire with 2 matches and no kindling. You might create a spark, but the fire won't catch. Creatine protects muscle, bone, and brain. You rarely find a single thing capable of acting on 3 fronts at the same time, and when you do, the natural instinct is to be suspicious. I understand that. Over more than 15 years of following patients in the second half of their lives, I've learned that suspicion is healthy, but that it sometimes deprives us of something genuinely useful. Creatine is exactly that case. I'm not talking about a laboratory promise or a passing fad. I'm talking about a substance that the body itself already produces in small amounts, and that with age is manufactured in increasingly smaller volumes. What the supplement does is replenish what time has taken away. The first front is muscular. Muscle fibers need quick energy to contract with force. When this energy is lacking, the muscle begins to lose volume and power, and this doesn't just happen in the gym, it happens on the stairs, with the shopping cart, in the chair you need to get up from on your own. I see this frequently in my practice. The person feels they are getting weaker for no apparent reason. The reason exists. Creatine acts at this very point, providing quick fuel for the fibers and helping to preserve the strength that keeps you independent. The second front is bone. Muscle and bone work together, and when one loses strength, the other feels it. Creatine helps keep this partnership working, supporting the structure that sustains the body day to day. But here comes a detail that almost no one notices. The third front is the brain. Nerve cells also need quick energy to function well, and creatine acts on them like a backup battery. When this battery is charged, the difference appears in clarity of thought, memory, and speed of thinking. Patients who start supplementing report that the mental fog they thought was inevitable with age begins to dissipate. It's not magic, it's basic biochemistry being supported. All this in an accessible powder, with a safety profile considered excellent by the scientific literature. A single intervention, 3 fronts of aging. This is not common. Signs that your bones are asking for attention. The body rarely shouts, it whispers, and most people only stop to listen when the whisper has already become a roar, as at the moment of a fracture. There are signs that appear before that, signs that the body itself sends months or even years in advance, and which are almost always ignored or mistaken for something else. I see this happen frequently in the office. The patient arrives after the fall, after the fracture, after the diagnosis, and when we review their history, the warnings were all there. The first is loss of height. Losing more than 2 centimeters in relation to your adult height is not normal aging. This indicates that the vertebrae may be compressing, losing structure. Many people think they have shrunk with age. That's not always the case. The second is a stooped posture, that progressive forward leaning that sets in gradually. It can indicate that the spine is giving way where it should be supporting. The third often goes unnoticed, brittle nails that don't improve with anything. Nails are mirrors of how the body is absorbing and distributing minerals. When they break easily and persistently, this can be a reflection of what is happening in the bones. The fourth is back pain with no clear cause, not the pain after lifting weight or from a bad position. I'm talking about that pain that appears out of nowhere, that lasts, that has no obvious explanation. This could be a vertebra that is suffering more than it should. And the fifth is the most revealing. Fracture from a light impact. A small fall, a silly bump, a simple movement, and the bone breaks. A healthy bone doesn't break like that. When this happens, the signal has gone from urgent to critical. Any of these signs by itself is enough to justify talking to your doctor and asking for a bone densitometry scan. It's a simple, painless exam that can clearly show what's happening inside your skeleton before something more serious occurs. Acting before the fracture, the window of opportunity. Waiting for a diagnosis to act is one of the most common mistakes I see in the office. Patients arrive with the osteoporosis report in hand, scared, asking what to do now. And I understand the shock. But what is difficult to say without hurting feelings is that this moment, in general, is already too late to completely reverse what has been lost. Bone fragility doesn't give a warning. It sets in silently, year after year, while life goes on. And when a fracture occurs, it's not just an injury, it's a turning point. I know patients who, after a hip fracture, never returned to their previous pace. They stopped walking alone, cooking, going out to see their grandchildren, not for lack of will, for lack of a bone structure to support it all. The science today is clear. There is a real window of opportunity to preserve bones, and it is open now, not after the fracture, not after the diagnosis. Now, 3 concrete habits combined in daily life create a genuine barrier against bone weakening. Daily creatine, adequate levels of vitamin D, and regular movement. Each of these has already been discussed here, but the central point still needs to be said with all the clarity it deserves. They need to start before you need them. Creatine supports the muscles, and with that, indirectly protects the bones. Vitamin D ensures that calcium gets where it needs to go. Movement sends the signal to the bone tissue that it is still needed, that it should be maintained and renewed. Together, these three elements not only slow down bone loss, in many cases they help reverse it, but only when the intervention begins early enough. Over more than 15 years of following patients in this phase of life, I've learned that those who act within the right window arrive differently. They arrive with more preserved bone, more active muscle, and more autonomy in their own bodies. The window is open. Start today. 3 grams of creatine monohydrate dissolved in your breakfast. Just that. This is the first concrete step to protect your bones before they need to scream for attention. Tell me here in the comments, did you already know about the power of creatine for bones? I want to know what you thought of this revelation, and if this content made sense to you, subscribe to the channel, because every week there's information like this waiting for you. Take good care of yourself. Take good care of those you love.